There's a shift that happens somewhere in your 50s. You stop thinking about what you could become and start protecting what you built. Warren Buffett understands this transition better than almost anyone alive, not just because he's now in his 90s, but because he's watched thousands of people navigate these same decades, some gracefully, some disastrously. And in that observation, patterns emerge, lessons that have nothing to do with stock picking and everything to do with living well. Your 50s and 60s aren't just another stage of life. They're the hinge, the years where decisions made casually can echo for decades, where mistakes made in haste can't be undone by time, where wisdom, if you're paying attention, finally starts to outweigh ambition. What follows is educational exploration, not personal financial advice. Always consult with qualified professionals before making decisions about your money. Lesson 1. Stop trying to get rich. If you're in your 50s and still chasing the big score, still convinced that one great investment will change everything, you're playing a dangerous game. Not because it's impossible. Fortunes have been made by people in their 50s, but because the cost of failure has become catastrophic. Buffett made his money young. By his mid-30s, he was a millionaire. But here's what most people miss. He didn't take bigger risks as he got richer. He took smaller ones. As his wealth compounded, his approach became more conservative, more focused on preservation than growth. This confuses people. They think wealth creation requires aggression, boldness, constant risk-taking. Maybe in your 20s and 30s, when you have decades to recover, that's true. But in your 50s, aggression becomes recklessness. Buffett has watched brilliant people destroy themselves by refusing to accept this reality. Executives who risked comfortable nest eggs on startups, retirees who moved entire portfolios into single stocks, entrepreneurs who bet everything on one more venture. Some won, most didn't, and those who didn't lost more than money. They lost time they couldn't get back, security they couldn't rebuild, peace of mind they couldn't recover. The shift Buffett advocates is simple: move from offense to defense. This doesn't mean stop investing. It means recognizing that the asymmetry of risk has changed. A 50% gain is nice. A 50% loss might ruin you. When you're 30, losing half your money means working a few more years. When you're 65, it might mean you can't retire, can't afford health care, or become a burden on your children. The math has changed. Your strategy must change with it. Buffett's own portfolio reflects this. As Berkshire Hathaway has grown, his cash reserves have grown even faster. He holds hundreds of billions in treasuries and cash, not because he's pessimistic, but because he understands that optionality is more valuable than marginal returns. For those in their 50s and 60s, this translates into something practical. Build a floor under your life. Calculate what you need to maintain your lifestyle, not what you want, what you need: housing, food, health care, basic dignity. Then ensure that amount is secure. Social Security, pensions if you have them, conservative investments that won't vanish in a market crash. Only after that floor is solid should you think about taking risks with the remainder. The game has changed. The rules that got you here won't get you to where you're going, and where you're going isn't up, it's across, steady, stable, safe. Lesson 2. Protect your health like your most valuable asset. Buffett has said this explicitly. The most important investment you'll ever make isn't in stocks or real estate. It's in your own body. And by the time you reach your 50s, that investment is either paying dividends or demanding payment. The parallel is obvious once you see it. Your body is the only portfolio you can't diversify out of. You can sell a bad stock. You can move to a different city. You can change careers, but you're stuck with your body. And unlike money, which can sometimes be replaced, your health, once lost, rarely comes back fully. By your 50s, the consequences of decades of decisions start manifesting. The smoking you did in your 30s shows up as COPD in your 60s. The weight you carried in your 40s becomes diabetes in your 50s. The stress you ignored becomes heart disease in retirement. Buffett has watched brilliant people waste their wealth on medical bills. He's seen friends die young because of choices. And he's watched others live vibrantly into their 90s because they took care of themselves consistently. This isn't about perfection. Buffett famously drinks Coca-Cola and eats McDonald's, but it's about basics: movement, sleep, stress management, avoiding obviously destructive behaviors. Here's the harsh economic reality. Every year of poor health in retirement costs you twice. First, in medical expenses. Second, in diminished quality of life. If you retire at 65 expecting 20 years of travel and freedom, but spend 10 managing chronic illness, you've lost half your retirement. Not just financially, existentially. Your 50s and 60s are your last chance to change the trajectory. After 70, you're mostly living with the consequences of earlier choices. But between 50 and 70, you still have agency. You can lose the weight, quit the cigarettes, start moving, manage the blood pressure. The return on investment is extraordinary, not in dollars, but in years, quality years. Years where you're traveling instead of visiting doctors, where you're playing with grandchildren instead of recovering from surgery, where you're living instead of merely existing. Lesson 3. The people you keep close become everything. Buffett has maintained a small circle of close friendships. Charlie Munger, Bill Gates, a handful of others that have defined his life as much as his investments. What he's learned is this: by your 50s, you know who matters. You know which relationships energize you and which drain you. You know who you can call at 3 in the morning and who wouldn't pick up. You know who's there because they genuinely care and who's there because of what you can do for them. And yet, most people continue maintaining relationships out of obligation, habit, or fear. Old friends who aren't really friends anymore. Family members who bring nothing but stress. Colleagues they've never actually liked. Buffett doesn't do this. He's ruthless about his time, not cruelly, but honestly. He spends time with people he enjoys, respects, and learns from. Everyone else gets polite distance. This matters more as you age because time is no longer abundant. If you're 55, you might have 25 good years left. That's not enough time to waste on people who don't enrich your life. The practical application is uncomfortable. You need to let some people go. Not dramatically, just quietly. Fewer phone calls, less availability, gentle distance. Buffett has made this choice repeatedly. He's walked away from business partnerships that weren't working. He's set boundaries with people who wanted access but didn't deserve it. He's protected his inner circle because he understands that the quality of your relationships determines the quality of your life. This doesn't mean becoming a hermit. It means becoming selective. It means recognizing that at this stage, you're not building a network. You're curating a community, a small group of people who matter. And here's the part nobody talks about. Sometimes the people you need to distance yourself from are family. Buffett has dealt with this. His relationship with his children has been complex, sometimes strained. By your 50s and 60s, you've learned that family relationships aren't automatically sacred just because of blood. Some family members lift you up, others pull you down. Buffett's approach is to set clear boundaries. He'll help to a point, but he won't enable. He'll maintain relationships as long as they're reciprocal and respectful. But he won't sacrifice his peace for duty. Choose your relationships as carefully as you choose your investments. Both compound over time. Both require maintenance. And both can either enrich your life or drain it. Lesson 4. Simplicity beats complexity. Buffett is one of the richest men who ever lived, and his investment strategy can be explained to a child. Buy good businesses when they're cheap. Hold them for a long time. Don't do stupid things. That's it. No derivatives, no complex hedging strategies, no algorithms, just patient, rational analysis applied consistently for decades. Most investors, especially as they get older and wealthier, do the opposite. They complicate everything. Multiple accounts at multiple institutions. Alternative investments they don't understand. Tax strategies so complex they require teams of accountants. Portfolios with 50 or 100 positions, each demanding attention and generating anxiety. Buffett has watched this complexity destroy people, not financially necessarily, but psychologically. They spend their retirement managing money instead of enjoying life. Every market fluctuation requires a decision. Every headline triggers anxiety. Their portfolio has become their identity. Buffett's advice to normal investors is almost comically simple. Buy a low-cost index fund and forget about it. Not because he doesn't understand sophisticated strategies, but because he understands that sophisticated strategies rarely beat simple ones after fees, taxes, and mistakes. For those already in their 50s and 60s with complex portfolios, the message is the same. Simplify. Consolidate accounts. Sell the weird stuff you bought because someone convinced you it was a good idea. Get rid of the rental property that's more trouble than it's worth. Reduce positions to a manageable few that you actually understand. The goal is to reach a point where you can ignore your portfolio for months without anxiety, where you're not checking prices daily, where your money works for you instead of demanding that you work for it. Whether you have 50,000 or 50 million, complexity is the enemy of peace. And in your 50s and 60s, peace is what you're really investing for. The simplest portfolio is the one you'll actually stick with. The simplest life is the one you'll actually enjoy. And the simplest strategy, executed consistently, almost always beats the complex strategy abandoned halfway through. Lesson 5. Money is just scorekeeping. The real game is meaning. Money beyond a certain point is just a way of keeping score. The real game is meaning. Buffett has given away tens of billions of dollars. He's pledged to give away more than 99% of his wealth before he dies. He lives in the same modest house he bought in the 1950s. He doesn't own yachts or private islands. The money, for him, was never about consumption. It was about proving a point, testing a theory, and once the point was proven, the money itself became less interesting than what could be done with it. This is the transition every person in their 50s and 60s must make. Whether they're worth billions or thousands, you have to answer the question, what's the money for? Not in general, specifically. What experiences, what security, what legacy, what impact do you want this money to enable? And just as importantly, what are you willing to give up to get more of it? Buffett has watched people answer this question poorly. Executives who worked themselves into heart attacks for an extra million they didn't need. Retirees who lived frugally to the point of misery, dying with millions in the bank and no memories. People who damaged relationships with their children over inheritances. The brutal truth is that most people in their 50s and 60s have enough. Not enough to buy everything they want, but enough to live well, to be secure, to enjoy their years. And yet they can't stop chasing more, not because they need it, but because they haven't figured out what else to do with themselves. Buffett's answer is to find meaning beyond accumulation. For him, that's meant philanthropy on a historic scale, working with the Gates Foundation to tackle problems larger than any one person could solve. Not everyone can or should aim for that scale, but everyone can and should find something that matters more than their brokerage balance. For some, it's grandchildren, the freedom to be present, to help, to create memories. For others, it's creativity, the painting they always wanted to finish, the book they always wanted to write. For others still, it's service, volunteering, mentoring, using decades of accumulated wisdom to help others. The specifics don't matter. What matters is the shift from acquiring to applying, from building to sharing, from striving to savoring. This is the gift of your 50s and 60s. You're old enough to know what matters and young enough to do something about it. You can still travel, still learn, still contribute, still change course if needed, but only if you stop measuring your worth by your net worth. Only if you redefine success from accumulation to fulfillment. Only if you're willing to ask hard questions about what you're actually trying to accomplish with the time you have left. The final truth. These 5 lessons: stop chasing wealth, protect your health, choose relationships carefully, simplify everything, and find meaning beyond money, aren't revolutionary. You've probably heard versions of all of them before, but knowing them intellectually and living them are different things. And the difference between people who thrive in their 50s and 60s and those who stumble comes down to whether they integrate these lessons or ignore them. Buffett didn't get everything right. He's been the first to admit mistakes. He stayed in an unhappy marriage longer than he should have. He prioritized work over family for decades. He failed to recognize some of his children's needs until it was almost too late. But he learned, adjusted, evolved. And in that evolution, he discovered that the second half of life operates by different rules than the first half. Success in your 20s and 30s is about building momentum. Success in your 50s and 60s is about maintaining balance. You can't grow forever. At some point, growth becomes unsustainable. Trees don't reach the sky. Companies plateau. People age. And the sooner you accept this natural arc, the sooner you can enjoy where you are instead of exhausting yourself trying to get somewhere else. This doesn't mean giving up. It means redirecting. It means asking not, how can I make more, but how can I make this matter? Not, how can I do more, but how can I do this better or more meaningfully or with greater intention? Because here's the final truth. Time is the only asset you can't replace. You can recover from financial losses. You can rebuild businesses. You can even repair some damaged relationships. But you can't get back years. You can't undo aging. You can't replay the moments you missed while you were chasing something that didn't matter. Buffett knows this now. He's in his 90s, still working, still engaged, but acutely aware that every year is precious. He's watching friends die. He's buried his partner, Charlie Munger. He's living with the reality that the clock, which seemed infinite when he was young, is now very much finite. For those of us in our 50s and 60s, the clock is ticking too, not loudly, not urgently, but persistently. And the question isn't whether we'll hear it. The question is whether we'll listen to what it's telling us. It's telling us to stop wasting time on things that don't matter, to stop postponing the experiences we claim we want to have, to stop damaging our health, our relationships, and our peace for marginal financial gains we don't need. Warren Buffett's lessons for your 50s and 60s aren't about beating the market or accumulating more wealth or impressing anyone. They're about living well, about making choices that your future self will thank you for, about protecting what matters and letting go of what doesn't. They're about accepting that you're no longer building a life, you're living it. And that shift from future focus to present aware is the most important transition you'll ever make. The people who make it successfully don't just survive their 50s and 60s, they thrive in them. They discover that these decades, which our culture dismisses as decline, can actually be the richest, most fulfilling years of all. Not because of what they accomplish, but because of who they become. And that, ultimately, is what Buffett has learned, that the measure of a life well lived isn't the size of your estate or the fame of your achievements. It's the peace you feel when you close your eyes, the love in your relationships, the meaning you've created, the wisdom you've shared. Everything else is just numbers. And numbers, as Buffett knows better than anyone, are a poor substitute for a life fully lived.